episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 383, Bag, Burrow, and Steal. The episode begins with Ash and the gang now on their way to Sarosi Town, a town that was mentioned back when May first finished her contest on Isabay Island when she beat Harley. Remember, they were going to do some sightseeing on the island and then head there. Well, that place happened to have a ferry service to Sutopolis City, their next destination, so that's why they were heading there. But while they were heading there, they ended up finding themselves lost in the middle of a desert. Though, Ash and the gang kind of viewed it as a wasteland, because it was entirely deserted, and they also spotted plenty of holes. Ash and the gang obviously wanted to get out of this desert immediately, so Max checked his Pokénav to look for the way out, but it didn't even register this desert on its location database. Brock looked for a map in his guidebook of Isabay Island, but he couldn't even find a map that had this desert included. It was like it didn't even fucking exist. May was scared that they wouldn't be able to find their way out of this desert, and she only got even more scared when she looked in all the holes and noted that they looked scary, since you could just fall into them and perhaps never even come out. And Max found it creepy when May pointed out that every hole was the exact same size, like they had to have been dug by something, and not just naturally there. Ash found this weird as well, and suggested that perhaps the thing that dug the holes could have been hiding inside of them, deep down in the hole. So he decided to throw a rock into one of the holes, the closest one to be exact, as he approached it to see if anything would reveal themselves. Just then, a Pokemon pops out from underground, deep in the hole, and immediately eats the rock, swallowing it almost whole. Curious as to who this Pokemon was, Ash consulted his Pokedex and learned that it was called Trapinch, a burrowing desert Pokemon with powerful jaws capable of eating sand and rock. As Trapinch disappears underground in the hole again, Max speculates that, based on the Pokedex entry, Trapinch were probably the ones who dug all the holes, and the rest of the gang agreed. He also came to the conclusion that there had to have been more Trapinch around, since there were so many holes, and there was no way a singular Trapinch could have dug each one of them. Just then, Ash and the gang were startled as they heard a police alarm, and soon enough, the source of the alarm was revealed to be from a Pokemon Ranger Jeep, and a Pokemon Ranger, being a woman named Eliza, was driving it, and she approached Ash and the gang. She soon gets out of her car and informs Ash and the gang that they were currently trespassing in a dangerous area, and demanded that they leave because of how dangerous the area was. Brock barely even listened to her, however, as he was too in love with her and started to flirt with her, introducing himself as Brock, leading the woman to fully introduce herself as Elisa to Ash and the gang, hoping that once she introduced herself, Brock would stop flirting, but Brock didn't stop, so Max was forced to pull him away by the ear, as usual. Ash and May then apologized, admitting that they weren't aware that the area was restricted and dangerous, and so they didn't know that they were trespassing. Although Ash admitted that the area didn't look very dangerous, so he thought it was perfectly reasonable for him and his friends to have not known that it was supposed to be a dangerous area, and he begins to step forward and walk around to try and examine the area to see if it truly was dangerous, but this was a mistake, as after taking only one step forward, the ground beneath him gives in, and he starts to fall down, directly into the hole that the Trapinch was in earlier. Although, before he could fall down, Elisa quickly saves him by grabbing a rope and throwing it to him, and Ash quickly grabs it and hangs on as Elisa pulls him up to safety, and Ash regains his footing. Elisa then explains that the reason why the area was so dangerous was because there was an underground tunnel network known as the Trapinch Underground Labyrinth that linked all of the craters, and they should do everything possible to avoid falling in, since the Trapinch could be dangerous. And she tried her best to explain the layout of the labyrinth, but she admitted that it was very hard to stay updated with what the current layout was, since the Trapinch would just keep digging and adding more and more to the labyrinth, and that was also a problem because they couldn't move any of the Trapinch out of the holes and place them somewhere else, since the Trapinch would just dig deeper and deeper and deeper and escape them, and since the labyrinth was so confusing, they couldn't find the Trapinch properly. Now that Elisa had assured Ash and the gang that the area was dangerous, she had them get in her car, and she drove them somewhere more safe. Along the way, Max was the first one to notice a wide variety of wild Pokemon, such as a male Nidoran, a female Nidoran, a Rhyhorn, a Rhydon, a Tauros, a Phanpy, a Zigzagoon, a Poochyena, and a Girafarig. The rest of the gang noticed all these Pokemon as well, and questioned what they were doing, and if they were safe or not, leading Elisa to explain that this area was a bit more safe, since it wasn't that close to the rest of the holes, and she had purposely brought all these Pokemon to this area, away from the area with all the holes, to protect them from the Trapinch. Suddenly, as Ash and the gang and Elisa were driving, they heard someone screaming, and as soon as they got closer, they found out what the source of the screaming was. It was a man who was running away from a wild, raging Donphan, getting chased by it, and he was screaming for help, since the Donphan seemed pretty angry. Elisa sighed in annoyance, indicating that something like this had happened before with this guy, and she sent out her Meganium, which May was instantly enamored by, using her Pokedex on it to learn more about it, as Meganium then used Sweet Scent, releasing it from its petals, which makes contact with the Donphan, and then calms it down as a result, as it stops running and slowly walks away. Elisa then thanks Meganium for its help and recalls it, as Ash and the gang were amazed by Meganium's ability to calm a raging Pokemon. The man was very grateful that the Donphan had gone away, and thanked Eliza for saving him again, implying that, yes, something like this had happened in the past. Eliza then introduces the man to Ash and the gang as Hal, saying they've known each other since they were kids, and Hal was basically known for getting into trouble, especially as a researcher. He would put his researching before his own safety a lot of the time, so he was probably researching this Donphan, and then it got angry or something, who knows. Hal officially greeted Ash and the gang, stating that he was an Isabay Island researcher, and admitted that although the Donphan did try and chase him and he was in trouble because of it, he didn't get in trouble because he was actually trying to research the Donphan. So Eliza asked him how he got in trouble, leading Hal to explain that he was looking for something different than a Donphan, and he then sees a Trapinch walk by and explains that that's what he was looking for. And Ash and the gang observed that the Trapinch had a transmitter of some kind on its back. Ash and the gang didn't really care about this. They wanted to know how the fuck he angered the Donphan. he started to explain, although he realized that he was sure Ash and the gang would find his story of why he wanted to find a trap-inch with a transmitter on his back a lot more interesting, so he started to explain that instead. Unbeknownst to Ash and the gang, and Hal and Elisa, they were all being spied on by Team Rocket as the periscope from their new Diglett mech stuck out from underground. They were currently underground, but they were listening in on the conversation thanks to their periscope, which somehow had a microphone on it. They weren't really listening to anything Ash and the gang, Eliza, or Hal were saying, though, as they were too busy planning. They planned to use the Diglett mech to catch Ash and the gang by surprise by suddenly emerging from the ground and then stealing Pikachu and injuring Ash and the gang. And they continued to plan inside their mech's cockpit while we go back to Ash and the gang, Eliza, and Hal, with Hal explaining why he wanted to find the trap-inch with a transmitter in the first place. Basically, he was searching for a secret underground lake in the trap-inch labyrinth, and he was planning to use this trap-inch with the transmitter to do so, because it must have been programmed to sense properties of a lake somehow. Ash and the gang were very intrigued by the prospect of an underground lake, but Eliza didn't think an underground lake actually existed, and suggested that Hal may have just dreamed it, but Hal disagreed, and assured her that it was real, since he discovered the lake when he was a young boy, and he had a story to tell about it. May and Max wanted to hear the story, especially along with Ash and Brock, but May and Max primarily, so Hal decided to enlighten the gang on his story. Basically, when he was younger, his parents had always warned him to stay out of the desert with all of the holes dug by the trap-inch. Yeah, that's right, all these holes had existed since he was a young boy. But despite his parents' warnings, Hal couldn't resist exploring the desert with all the holes. And we then see a flashback of when he was a young kid and happened to get lost in the desert. And once he got lost and tried to find his way out, he fell into one of the trap-inch holes, and he started to sink into the dirt and passed out. And when he woke up, the first thing he saw was a large, beautiful underground lake, since that's where the hole had led him. However, he didn't just see a lake, but on the other side of the lake, he saw many trap-inch gathered around it. And he recalled wondering why all the trap-inch were gathered together when he suddenly saw them all start glowing and evolve into their second stage, Vibrava, and this completely amazed Hal at how they all evolved at once. And then the next thing he knew, he followed them out of the lake, but then his memory faded from them, and he couldn't remember how he actually got out, because basically his memory fogged. He remembered following the Vibrava, but then the next thing he remembered, he was just suddenly out of the underground lake area. With that, the flashback and Hal's story came to an end, and Ash and the gang were amazed by it. With May particularly amazed by how the Vibrava had suddenly evolved from trap-inch, and she assumed that it was the Vibrava that helped Hal get back outside the lake, even though he didn't know for sure, and Hal exclaimed that that's what he believed as well, even though he didn't know for sure either. Ash was also amazed hearing about the Vibrava, but he'd never seen one before, so he looked it up in his Pokédex to learn more information about it, as Elisa stated that she didn't believe the story at all, and accused Hal of making it up, although Hal reminded Elisa that she used to believe the story, and questioned why she didn't anymore, leading Elisa to clarify that she only believed it back when she was 5 years old, when Hal first told the story. Brock then asked if the encounter that he had with the Vibrava was what motivated him to become a Pokemon researcher, stating that that definitely would have motivated him to become a researcher, and Hal confirms this. Suddenly, Max alerted everyone that during Hal's story, the trap-inch with the transmitter had gotten away. There was no need for panic, though, as it didn't get very far. May spotted it simply just walking down into the nearby hole, and Hal stated his assumption that trap-inch was likely heading down the hole to get to the lake, because it was evolution season now, and it wanted to evolve. Although Eliza had her doubts, both that the trap-inch would evolve by going into the hole, and that there was the underground lake down there. Just then, Ash and the gang, Eliza and Hal were caught off guard and shocked when the ground started to vibrate, and immediately after this, Team Rocket emerged from underground in their Diglett mech, which grabbed Pikachu with its mechanical claw, and then Team Rocket came out of the mech and did their motto, with Chimecho joining in on the motto, as per usual now. Of course, Ash demanded Pikachu back from Team Rocket, but Team Rocket naturally refused, so Ash told Pikachu to use Thunderbolt, but Team Rocket just laughed, as Thunderbolt didn't work, leading me off to explain that much like a real Diglett, their Diglett mech was ground type, haha. No, actually it wasn't ground type, he was just fucking with them, but of course, the machine was just insulated with stuff that prevented it from getting hit with electrical attacks, as per usual. Ash should have expected this shit by now. Ash was so angry, he couldn't even focus on sending out a Pokemon, but luckily for him, Brock decided to take Team Rocket's statement about their mech being a ground type quite literally, and sent out his Ludicolo to use Water Gun, and it eventually did, but Brock had to stop it from doing a dance with Max, and trying to play with Max first, which was actually much to Max's delight, as Max got kinda annoyed with Ludicolo's dancing. Anyways, the Water Gun caused the mech to short-circuit and practically explode and start smoking as it fell into one of the trap-inch holes that was nearby, since it could no longer stand up, leading Team Rocket to scold Meowth for telling Ash and the gang that ground-type comment, because otherwise Brock may not have thought to use the Water Gun. Anyways, Pikachu obviously fell into the hole as well, since the mech was still grabbing onto it, and then it was revealed that there were many trap-inch that had emerged from underground, being disturbed by the fall of the mech, and they started to bite the mech, and practically were eating it away, leading Hal to state his assumption that the trap-inch were upset because their natural habitat, being the hole, and all the nests that they had dug in it, were attacked, so they were just trying to defend their natural habitat. Eventually, Team Rocket were forced to escape their mech, as the trap-inch literally ate it down to scrap metal, and then nothing at all. They ate every single thing related to the mech, including the arm that captured Pikachu, so now Pikachu was technically free, but it couldn't do anything, because since Team Rocket or Pikachu were no longer being secured by the mech, they all started to fall through and sink down underground. This immediately worries Ash, so he goes after Pikachu, diving into the hole and sinking underground. Elisa, worried for Ash since he'd never been down in the labyrinth underground before, runs after him, and she falls through the ground as well. Hal then sends the trap inch with the transmitter down into the hole underground so that he could keep track of the trap inch's location. And Hal essentially revealed that that's why he put the transmitter on Trapinch, was so that if the Trapinch went underground, he knew that it would likely go to the lake, so he could find out where the lake was. But now in this case, he could use the tracker to keep track of where the Trapinch was, so that he could keep track of where Eliza and Ash were. Underground, the Trapinch with the transmitter, Ash, Eliza, and Team Rocket had all made it into the labyrinth, and since the labyrinth had so many paths, Team Rocket fell down one path, and Ash, Eliza, and the Trapinch fell down another path. And Pikachu fell down the path with Team Rocket. Both groups examined their surroundings, but all they could see was long dark tunnels. Meanwhile, back at the top of the hole, May, Brock, Max, and Hal hadn't fallen in, but Brock, May, and Max were still worried since Hal hadn't gotten any word from his transmitter, so they wondered if they were going to have to find another way to help out Ash, Elisa, and Pikachu. But were stressed since they didn't know what to do because, they could just get lost in the labyrinth as well and all that shit. But luckily, Hal then informed May, Max, and Brock that he actually did find a signal of Trapinch, and he showed Trapinch's signal from the monitor that he had that was connected to the transmitter. Now that Hal had the location of Trapinch, he assured May, Max, and Brock that everything would be okay. Hal then started to walk towards the hole with a rope. He was essentially going to tie the rope to a little rock just outside the hole so that he could slowly lower himself down underground so that he wouldn't get trapped and, lost underground. But unfortunately, he slipped. May, Brock, and Max tried to warn him that he could slip because he was walking pretty carelessly, but Hal still slipped regardless and fell down underground. His whole rope strategy, that was fucked. It didn't work. He couldn't even implement it. Regardless, Hal got up onto his feet, and he checked the monitor that had the transmitter signal and saw its precise location, so he walked through the underground tunnel and aimed to find Trapinch, Elisa, and Ash. Meanwhile, back with Ash, Elisa, and the Trapinch, Ash and Elisa were calling out for Pikachu, with Ash very desperate to find Pikachu, declaring he would never leave the labyrinth until he found him. Unfortunately, even after calling, Ash and Elisa were having no luck finding Pikachu. Elisa wanted to just get to safety as soon as possible, so she was trying to keep track of the way they came and compare it to a way she knew how to get out of the labyrinth, explaining that she knew that if they went the opposite way than the way they were going right now, then they could find a way out. But she clarified that she would definitely help Ash find Pikachu first. Just then, Trapinch started to walk in a different direction that wasn't backwards or the direction they were currently going, so Ash and Elisa decided to follow it, hoping that it may somehow know where Pikachu was. Meanwhile, Team Rocket was going down another tunnel in the labyrinth, very tired and hungry, almost not able to continue on, when suddenly they spotted Trapinch as it walked right in front of them. Meowth suggested that they should steal the Trapinch and give it to Giovanni, leading James to ask why Giovanni would even want it, and Meowth started to go into one of his boss fantasies yet again, explaining it to Jesse and James. Basically, Giovanni was just, working and doing his regular Team Rocket business when he got super hungry, and the closest food he had to him was a walnut, and he didn't want to go get any other food since, he was busy doing his business, so he just went to go open the walnut, but he couldn't open it. But then he could just call in Trapinch and have the Trapinch crack the walnut open for him. And then, according to Meowth, Giovanni would give Team Rocket promotions and compliment Team Rocket endlessly because they gave him a great gift or some shit. And Jesse, James, and Meowth all cheered at this, excited to get promotions. But since they were so distracted, thinking, they almost didn't notice that Trapinch was running away. And James was the first one to finally stop cheering and realize that Trapinch was not only getting away, it was entirely gone now, and they had no clue where it went. And even though Jesse, James, and Meowth were all equally at fault for this, because they were all equally zoned out, Jesse blamed the entire thing on James. Although Meowth told Jesse and James to shut up, as he apparently heard something, and as he listened closely, he heard something coming their way, footsteps, and instructed Jesse and James to hide behind a nearby rock, and they did so, along with Wobbuffet. As Team Rocket hid, they saw the source of the footsteps being Hal, who happened to walk into their tunnel while looking for Trapinch on his transmitter. Team Rocket observed that Hal was looking for Trapinch as Hal called out for him, so knowing this, Team Rocket planned to let Hal guide them right to the Trapinch so that they could steal it. So Hal walked through the tunnel and Team Rocket silently followed him, looking for the Trapinch. Meanwhile, back outside the hole, May, Brock, and Max were extremely worried for Hal, hoping that he didn't get injured when he fell in or some shit, and they stressed, knowing that they would now have to go into the hole as well, and they tried to come up with a safe way to do this as Max walked towards the edge of the hole, but just like Hal, he slipped and started to fall in. Thankfully, before Max fell, though, May was able to rush over and grab him, but because she ran so fast, she slipped as well. But Brock ran and grabbed onto May, so now Brock was holding onto May as May was holding onto Max. But the weight of both May and Max was too heavy for only one of Brock's arms, so Brock fell down, meaning that May and Max fell down with him, so they tumbled down into the tunnels, underground. Meanwhile, Ash, Elisa, and Trapinch were still looking for Pikachu in a tunnel, when suddenly Brock, May, and Max fell down in front of them. Ash instantly noticed that Hal wasn't with May, Brock, and Max, and asked where Hal went, leading Brock to explain that Hal had went looking for Ash and Elisa, but fell down at a different time than them and must have ended up somewhere else. Anyways, Trapinch seemed to be looking around for something, as it then digs a hole out of one of the walls at the end of the tunnel, eating rocks to do so. Basically, this hole was meant to serve as a little path, and Trapinch had just dug it. Just then, though, Elisa heard something. It was water from an unknown source, coming from the hole, and it was gonna come through the hole, and sure enough, a huge flood of water rushed through the hole that Trapinch had just dug towards everyone. So, They all ran away from the water as fast as they could, not wanting to drown. As Ash and the gang and Elisa looked behind them and saw the tunnel flooding fully, Brock suggested that Trampitch must have known that the flood was coming, so it was curious and ended up digging the hole, which only made the flood come quicker. Unfortunately, Ash and the gang and Elisa weren't able to outrun the water, and they get overwhelmed by it, and basically they just get dragged by the water, eventually being led to the lake that Hal spoke of, as the water basically trails back to, obviously the water would trail back to the lake because it was the other water source in the holes. Everyone examines the lake, and the trees and foliage that had grown by it as well, in amazement at the fact that the lake did actually exist. Just then, as they realized that Hal had been telling the truth about the lake, they all heard Pikachu call out to them, and Ash saw it standing on the land, on the other side of the lake. So Ash quickly swam to Pikachu and happily hugged him, very happy to be reunited, and on land. Just then, Max spots the Trapinch with the transmitter, who had just walked out of another tunnel that hadn't gotten flooded. And immediately following Trapinch was Hal, who was amazed to see the lake after all this time, and was proud that his transmitter had led him to both the lake and Ash and the gang and Elisa, who he soon saw when Elisa called him over, and happy that everyone was reunited and safe. Meanwhile, Team Rocket had still been following Hal, so they emerged from the tunnel as well, and upon seeing Ash and the gang, Hal, and Elisa, they quickly hid behind a rock and examined the lake, finding it beautiful. But what they were more interested in was Pikachu and Trapinch, declaring that they were going to capture Pikachu and Trapinch, but mostly Pikachu, because they'd forgotten about it after it initially landed with them, and ran off once Team Rocket was distracted due to the pain of their landing. Anyways, Hal took the opportunity to inform Elisa that he wasn't lying about seeing the lake the entire time, and stated how awesome it was, how there was an underground lake and shit. Elisa agreed, and apologized for not believing him, and stated that she was a fool for not doing so. Although Hal stated his belief that Elisa did actually believe him the entire time, she just didn't want to admit it, because she didn't want to look like a fool if it didn't exist. Elisa admitted this was true, and blushed, indicating that she liked Hal all this time. But this whole conversation was interrupted when Ash and the gang noticed that the Trapinch seemed to be gathering, including the one with the transmitter, as Ash pointed out that a whole bunch of Trapinch had assembled around the lakeside. Then, much to Ash and the gang, Eliza, and Hal's amazement, all of the Trapinch suddenly start to glow, and they all evolved into Vibrava, and the one that had Hal's transmitter lost the transmitter since it fell off as soon as it evolved. Everyone was especially amazed to see that all the Trapinch had evolved at the same time, just like Hal had said in his story. Even Team Rocket were amazed, and Jesse and James then got sad at the fact that they couldn't capture the Trapinch anymore, since they'd evolved. But Meowth reminded Jesse and James that they were Vibrava now, and Vibrava were part Dragon type, so this was just even better for them, since he knew that Giovanni would love Dragon types, and Jesse and James knew that Dragon types were usually worth a lot of money because they were pretty rare, and Jesse and James began to imagine all the money they could make from either giving the Vibrava to Giovanni or selling the Vibrava. So all they knew was that they were going to try their best to capture them. Just then, the Vibrava fly off, going to leave the hole and go somewhere else, up in the sky. But before they can go, Team Rocket suddenly captures all of the Vibrava in a large balloon-based net. Basically, Team Rocket deployed a net from their Meowth balloon after sneaking inside it. Don't ask how they had the Meowth balloon. Maybe they lowered it down into the hole with a remote or something. Who knows? And yeah, they essentially just captured the Vibrava in a net that was attached to their Meowth balloon, and they got in their Meowth balloon. As Ash and the gang observed all this, shocked to see Team Rocket. Brock was very mad to see the Vibrava captured, as he was very much enjoying seeing them fly, so he sent out his Ludicolo to try and take out Team Rocket. But Ludicolo first played with Max yet again, much to Brock's annoyance. Elisa then sends out her Meganium to help as well, and Ludicolo eventually gets his shit together and fires a Bullet Seed, which injures Team Rocket, preventing them from doing much, as Meganium then used a Razor Leaf to cut the net filled with the Vibrava, so the Vibrava were now free, which made Team Rocket super mad, so Jesse sent out a Dustox, and James sent out a Cacnea to try and take out Ludicolo and Meganium, although Cacnea of course hugged James first. After this was done though, Dustox fired a Poison Sting, and Cacnea fired a Pin Missile directly at Ash and the gang, Ludicolo and Meganium, and Hal and Elisa. Although before the Poison Sting and Pin Missile can make contact, the Vibrava fly in front of Ash and the gang and block the attacks by using Supersonic, both hurting Team Rocket and sending the Pin Missile and Poison Sting back at them. With Team Rocket distracted from this, Pikachu used a Thunderbolt on Team Rocket, sending them all blasting off out of the hole, which had an opening at the top. Now, Ash and the gang had to figure out how the fuck to get out of the lake area, and the hole in general. They were struggling with how to come up with an idea, when the Vibrava suddenly got up close to them and lifted them up off the ground. And then the Vibrava fly Ash and the gang, and Hal and Elisa out of the hole, much to their delight. And they enjoy riding on the Vibrava as well. It was a fun time. After they were out of the hole, though, the Vibrava set Ash and the gang down, and they flew off as Ash and the gang, Elisa, and Hal waved goodbye to all the Vibrava. While Ash and the gang talked about how fun it was to ride the Vibrava next to each other, Hal and Elisa talked about the same thing. Then, now that everyone was free from the hole, it was time for Ash and the gang to continue on their journey, so they prepared to say goodbye to Elisa and Hal, as Elisa gave Ash and the gang directions to the nearest town. Although, it wasn't the town that they were looking for, Sorosi Town. Anyways, May then congratulated Hal on finally seeing the lake again after his childhood, as Hal declared that he wanted to keep the lake a secret so that the Trapinch could evolve in peace. and, not have anyone disturb them. And he stated that the only reason why he wanted to even find the lake again in the first place, because he already knew it existed, was because he wanted to prove to Elisa that it existed, and he wanted to show her it in a personal moment together. As he says this, Hal begins to blush, and Eliza begins to blush as well, leading May to be happy that Eliza and Hal had a connection with each other, and we're now probably gonna be boyfriend-girlfriend, fuck each other's brains out, yeah, all that shit. And Ash, Max, and May were pleased with this, happy that they just witnessed the birth of a new couple, while Brock was sad as fuck that he didn't have a chance with Elisa, although, despite being sad, he tried his best to act like he was happy, and put on a brave face, and Ash and the gang then left to the nearest town, saying goodbye to Eliza and Hal, although they were probably fucking right in front of them as they left, who knows.